theory, about to be joined by up to 80 people who are distributed virtually. And, they'll be seeing us in this room as well. We won't be seeing them. And it's Julie is going to be the jockey. Will explain her role, but she's going to be managing everything.
Or it appears to be working.
Okay, so do you want me to start?
Well, wait a second, stop. I'm trying to record on my side. I was thinking. Okay, it appears to be recording.
So I start?
Yep.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's welcome to the webinar for the Canadian Mountain Network as we look towards the creation of a networks of centers of excellence letter of intent, a proposal that we'll be submitting later this year in support of mountain research across the country. So today we'll be engaging this seminar over the next up to 2 hours. We will see how long we need to complete our activities, but I just have a few introductory remarks to get us kicked off, and then I'll be introducing other people to join us. So I want to thank, first of all, lots of people for participation. And first, I want to make sure that we are all aware of the robust and steadfast support of the University of Alberta and the Faculty of Science in particular, and we're really pleased today to have with us at the University of Victoria, Jonathan Schaefer, who's the Dean of Science. So thank you, Jonathan, for your leadership in showing the way for what we're doing here. So we'll be following up this webinar with all the registrants by email and distributing an online form so that everyone has an opportunity to provide additional comments and feedback. And of course, this being a webinar, what we'll be encouraging everyone to do is to bring in comments, and we'll be explaining how that will work in a few minutes, but bringing in comments as we go along. So this is, to the extent a webinar can make this possible, an interactive forum. So what's the purpose of the webinar today? Well, it's the next step in an iterative process that we've been engaging since early 2016 as we work towards developing a Canadian mountain network and to pursue the ambition of a successful network grant to support the activities focused on Canadian mountains. So this Networks of Centers of Excellence program, we'll be talking a little bit more about it later, is a signature funding program of the federal government to create networks of researchers that reach out into a broader society as well. So we're here to discuss our progress with a letter of intent that we've been developing. That's the first step in a successful application. And we'll again be talking more details about that. And we'd like to hear from you at this juncture about some of the key aspects of that letter of intent. So we want to get some feedback on a whole variety of things, both today and going forward. So if all goes well, and I'll just mention this now, is we should have a formal call for these letters of intents shortly. My prediction, for what it's worth, is perhaps as early as the end of the week, but it could be a little longer. And we're likely to have a deadline sometime in August. So I'm going to say middle of August until we know for sure. And so it's a sprint between now and the middle of August to get this letter of intent going. And then from there, if we're successful, we'll find out October-ish whether we'll be invited to a full proposal. And from there, a full proposal will be written and then submitted, and then we wait till we find out the verdict. But more on that later. So we thought this webinar would be the best way to make our request for feedback to the diverse network. We have so many different kinds of people representing so many different institutions. So this is very far from being a university-only kind of initiative. This involves people from government agencies, from non-government organizations, from First Nations, and from industry, municipalities, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some important sectors. But that's the beauty of an NCE, is that it brings together people from so many different backgrounds. So I'm going to now pass it over to Julie to speak a little bit about the mechanics of the webinar software.
All right. So the first thing I want to note is just crashed with my computer. So everything seems to be going okay from this side, but I will be double checking that in a couple minutes. Just want to go over the basics of the technical parts of the webinar. First things first, everyone please note that the webinar is being recorded, and also that we will be supplying online forms for additional written feedback at the end of the event. So everyone who is attending this webinar online, you are muted as an attendee. Nobody can hear you and nobody can see your video. But there are a few ways for you to communicate with us. So you should be seeing our screen, basically. We're sharing the screen. You should also be seeing a webcam so you can see me talking. And if you want to change the size of the webcam, you can do that by clicking and dragging on the corner of where the webcam is. Then there are 3 ways for you to interact with us. So the first one is to raise your hand. So there's a little icon with a hand on it, and when you click on it, it should turn green. Then I will be able to see that your hand is raised. Then there's also asking a question. So asking a question, you can just click on the little bubble with a question mark, type in your question. Nobody else sees your question except for me, and then I will be able to either answer you privately, or I could answer to the group as a whole if it's a relevant question for the group as a whole. And nobody sees who the question is from, so that part is anonymous. And so this is what it would look like. You would type the question and you would receive an answer in written form, or we'll probably address it orally as well. The other option is chatting, so I will write something to initiate the chat, and then you can just respond to the chat box by clicking on the bubble that has the 3 dots in it and going to the chat. So once again, I can respond to you privately or publicly. And as I mentioned, or as has been mentioned, last but not least, after the webinar is over, you will receive a follow-up email, and it will include a link to a recording of the webinar and to the online forums where you can provide in-depth feedback and ideas and more.
Thanks, Julie. And just if you have questions as you go along, Julie's happy to answer them online. So I want to introduce, first of all, the leadership team that has been involved in the day-to-day activities of both launching the Canadian Mountain Network and this NCE initiative. So on the upper left of the screen is Christy Urban, Canadian Mountain Network's Executive Director. Christy's been with us since, I'm going to get this wrong, last summer, right? No, was it January? Oh my gosh. Right, it's January you started, sorry. But Christy is based at the University of Alberta and has been tirelessly moving us forward on all of this. You've heard from me already. I'm a professor here at the School of Environmental Studies at the University of Victoria, and I've been helping with the leadership of the Canadian Mountain Network as a whole and with this NCE initiative. And I'm also a longtime researcher in the mountains. This photograph of me is actually in Jasper National Park, for those of you who want the skill testing mountain question. Jeff Kavanagh at the University of Alberta is a co-lead, a scientific co-lead with me, and is a professor in Earth and Atmospheric Sciences at the University of Alberta. Matthew Barry is the Director of Partnership Development and is based in Calgary. Leo Surye, who is the who described herself as a writer earlier. If you heard, you didn't hear that introduction, but she described herself. We did a little round of introductions earlier, and she very quietly said, "I'm just a writer." But actually, Leo is our grant proposal whisperer. So she is going to be, she's working very hard, has been up to this point, and will continue to really massage all of the complexity of our thoughts and ideas and hopes into this letter of intent. So thank you for being here, Leo. And David Hick, who has been the, I'm going to call him the spiritual leader, but he's been involved in mobilizing the Canadian Mountain Network from the beginning. And some of you will have participated in the launch event a year ago, January, at the University of Alberta that David organized. And he's been working so hard on creating really important relationships, both within the mountain communities and mountain research communities, but also internationally, beyond Canada's borders, to try to connect up what we're doing with what other people are doing around the world. So that's the team, that's the leadership team. We've been working as a group since last summer on pulling all of this together. If you want more information, more biographical information, then the Canadian Mountain Network website, that's canadianmountainNetwork.ca, has additional biographical information. So we formed this initiative. I mean, its roots go back a little bit farther, but it really had its formative moment in January 2016 at a Canadian Mountain Network workshop in Edmonton at the University of Alberta, where there was unanimous sentiment that forming a mountain network in Canada was a good idea. Now, it's important to describe a distinction between the Canadian Mountain Network and the NCE program. So think of the Canadian Mountain Network as a really large tent that is covering and supporting all the activities of people interested in Canadian mountains, both mountain science, mountain culture, mountain development, and so on. So all of those activities being covered under, so the network was brought together or created really to bring people into one place to try to provide greater capacity. So that's the network. Now what we're talking about specifically today is the Networks of Centers of Excellence Research Funding Program. So that in a sense you can see it as an outcome of the Canadian Mountain Network, closely linked to it, but not exactly the same thing. So we'll talk perhaps more about that and what that looks like. So over the last year and a half, we've been working on establishing a variety of regional initiating groups. We call these the IGs for short, initiating groups, to better understand what's important to mountain peoples and mountain environments. So these are, we have strong IGs formed in the Yukon, in the Northwest Territories, in Alberta, and British Columbia. And we've also got many researchers in Eastern Canada who are connected with what we're doing, and we'll see whether that emerges into an initiating group or not. But the IGs have been really, really important in helping at the grassroots level shape how we think about these initiatives. We've also developed a mountain portal, our website, that's a wonderful source of mountain news and a way of translating mountain research findings into plainer language. So that's been underway, and it's a really busy site, and we've had lots and lots of praise about what that's been able to achieve. We celebrated last December United Nations International Mountain Day with 7 communities across Canada. And this spring marks our formal venture into this letter of intent process for the NCE. And that's going to be the focus for most of the rest of our discussion today. So let's talk briefly about the NCE program. And I want to note that in terms of breaking news, the federal government released, or sorry, not the federal government, but the Fundamental Science Review, also known as the Naylor Commission, released the findings of its intense investigations into the nature of science support in Canada, and that report was released earlier today. So we are now in possession of probably the most significant broad-scale assessment of Canadian science and recommendations going forward. So we've been digesting those in the last couple of hours. But the news is good for what we're trying to do overall. And I won't go into detail, but just to say that that was gratifying to see that. So we are almost certain to be proceeding forward with this NCE initiative. So NCEs, I'm sorry for all the acronyms, but Networks of Centers of Excellence, it's so much easier to say NCE. We can characterize them as programs that involve organizations and researchers from many institutions. So a typical NCE might have 15 to 25 projects going on at any one time in, say, between 3 and 6 different thematic groups, up to 75 professors from 10 to 20 universities. So we're just characterizing the the range of activity, but big scale partnerships. There's usually somewhere between 100 and 200 highly qualified people being under training, and it's another acronym we use a lot, is HQP. As many as 50 partner organizations supporting these initiatives, and funding at somewhere between $3 and $6 million annually, which is often doubled with contributing cash and in-kind support, which is an essential ingredient in an NCE process. So this program was established in 1989 and is intended to provide a longer arc of funding than many research programs do. So the funding happens in 5-year chunks, and up to this point, that's been renewable for up to 2 times. So some of the programs have been going for 15 years before they are sunsetted or transform into something a bit different. So these are longer term programs, and that's why we were so excited about launching an NCE in mountains, because we really want to try to provide greater capacity for the next generation of mountain researchers in particular. And we can do this by having this longer trajectory. So there's a variety of networks that we've been, some of us have been involved in different ways, and just a few of them are illustrated on the slide. The Aging Network, AgeWell, ArcticNet, which is just coming to its conclusion after 15 years. GlycoNet, there's a relatively new one that's marine-based, the MEOPAR network. So there are lots of different ones that are engaged at any one time. We're hoping to become one of the new ones. So they focus on specific issues and strategic areas. So these are purpose-directed research programs. So they're looking at priority issues. They're looking for the communities across the country to come together and say, this is what we think is important, and let's go ahead and bring together this network and provide it with resources. So that's when we started to have this hint that a mountain-based network would be important, we tested that idea out, and it was just unanimous. People said, yes, it'd be terrific if we could bring more capacity and bring people together. So it's multidisciplinary for sure. We're required to represent at least 2 of the 3 main federal granting councils. So the social sciences, natural sciences, and then also health. So we're endeavoring to do it in a very multidisciplinary way. The idea is that an NCE will accelerate new knowledge creation by bringing together key people who may not have been brought together before, or to establish critical mass in a particular area of mountain research that hasn't been able to get off the ground. And so this is where we see the NCE program as particularly valuable. It also trains a whole generation of people who are going to be carrying this forward, and that's one of its huge long-term impacts, where you are able to provide high-quality funding that mobilizes a whole future commitment to mountain research. And then there's tremendous national and international collaboration. So one of the things we've noted is that Canadian mountain researchers have less interaction than is desirable on the international stage. So this is one way of being able to bring this closer together. So what would success look like at the end of this webinar? So what do we want to achieve? Well, success would be I think in three particular forms. So the first is that we'll be able to articulate our progress on developing a letter of intent for the NCE process. Secondly, that we've received feedback and ideas in all key areas from all of you who are joining in with us today, and that we have an indication of who might be interested in participating in our application. So we've been working and talking for the last year and a half, but there are always new people who want to be engaged, and we're looking for people who are particularly keen on that level of engagement. So I'm going to turn it over now to David Hick, who's going to speak about the research program specifically.
Okay, there's a couple questions, so I'm going to go to the questions from here because it's being a little weird on my computer right now. I don't even have sound. Great, all is on and working. Good. Sorry, I'm just reading through these questions, everyone. Bear with me for a minute. All good remotely. Great. Yes. Okay, so anyone who's asking about the chat, it'll appear in a moment when I actually get it to work on my computer, and then you'll be able to chat. But for now, the question seems to be working. So there's a content question here. Content question is there a definition of mountain? Eric, would you like to address that?
No. David. I'll speak to that in my introduction.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks, Eric, for that introduction. I'm just going to briefly present the framework for the research themes that's emerged, and then I'm going to let Leo delve a little bit deeper into some of the feedback that we need at this stage to further populate both the specific activities and the unique aspects of mountain research that would be included within the program. So let me just say first of all that we've very much appreciated the input through the initiating group process over the last year. And what we've been challenged with, of course, with all of these ideas is somehow framing a larger set of umbrella ideas, concepts, and themes that we can start to look at populating for the NCE. There's a couple of things that have happened through this process. One is an acknowledgement that the type of research-led activities that have been dominant in other NCEs need to be balanced with things that occur and are led by communities, and in particular that are led by Indigenous knowledge holders. And so we've adapted our graphical representation to try to acknowledge that the Mode 1, Mode 2, Mode 3 types of research that are emerging through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations, through the experience of other NCEs like ArcticNet, need to be captured at the front end and will become core principles of how we operate and go forward, including recognizing that the partners involved in the Canadian Mountain Network will be required to sort of address the balance of approaches that we adopt. And this is very important because if you, when you get a chance to digest the Naylor report, one of the recommendations with respect to NCEs is to amend the term of reference to foster collaboration of multi-center strength in basic research in all disciplines, but recognizing the importance of Indigenous knowledge and early career, the development of early career researchers. So in terms of the themes that we've identified, two of these are what you can think of as enveloping themes, or sort of foundational themes. These are inspired voices and building knowledge. And if you think of inspired voices, this really represents the inclusivity that has been part of the development of the Canadian Mountain Network so far. And that includes established programs at its foundation, but also this important emphasis on building capacity and opportunities for including early career scientists in the leadership and the development of the NCE from the very beginning. So just as a concrete example, one of the things that we would like to do is have the themes and the projects led by senior researchers and early career scientists, or Indigenous knowledge holders, or other people that bring a different perspective and capacity to those programs. And to recognize that we need to find ways to include rural, remote, and Indigenous partners actively in the development of the program. So this has been part of the IG process. We've tried to capture that both in terms of the presentation of the themes and the discussion that's accompanied that. In terms of building knowledge, one of the priorities for an NCE program is having end users that are actually interested in the research that's being done. So this knowledge to action continuum is something that we need to develop. And there's actually a lot of research that needs to be included in that effort, including addressing the way that science and policy are connected. But that building knowledge piece also is founded on the way that we adopt data management infrastructure and principles right from the very beginning, for example. And that's a landscape that's changing rapidly in Canada, and we're trying to make sure we from the very beginning adopt and acknowledge the best practices around that. And finally, the opportunity to enhance research platforms that exist across the country, whether it's the research stations that some of you operate, or laboratories that are capable of sort of world-class analysis of data, or the networking among communities in mountain regions that doesn't exist at this time. So it's that sort of foundation of knowledge that is sort of captured as an overarching requirement for a successful NCE. And then the core themes themselves, elevating opportunities, places for lives, and sentinels of change, are a way of capturing the interdisciplinarity and the interconnectedness of the research that could be included in the NCE. And these are still very broad at this stage. We haven't, in some cases, there's suggestions for pieces that would be obvious elements of an NCE, but that's one of the objectives of this meeting, is to get that input about those programs, the leadership of those programs, and the individuals who would be prepared to commit to the development of the Canadian Mountain Network and the NCE. So I'm going to turn it over to Leo at this point, rather than duplicating the sort of description of those themes. But I just want to emphasize that this is really an outcome of what we've heard through the conversations over the last year or more. And it's, of course, open for discussion. It needs to be populated, but it, we think, creates a unique way of presenting what we're trying to accomplish with the NCE and with the Canadian Mountain Network. So I'll turn it over to you, Leo.
Thank you, David. So one of the really critical aspects of an NCE, of course, is the letter of intent. And as part of the letter of intent, there are a number of different areas where we have to provide very concrete information about what it is that this NCE will do. And one of those sections is the excellence of the research program. And what is really critical here is that we have very specific outputs that are tangible, concrete, solutions, deliverables that the NCE has an intention to produce and create in a sort of focused as opposed to ad hoc approach. So we can't have lots of little projects that are useful maybe in themselves, but they have to lead to a larger focus. Okay. And then that those outputs result in positive outcomes that derive from the research, from the training and other activities that the NCE takes on, and through the solutions that it develops. So in we have identified 5 themes. As David noted, there are 2 enveloping themes: inspired voices and building knowledge. And within each of these themes, we have to identify what we need to focus on. So what are the specific outputs that we're going to create? We could, for example, be creating toolkits that support community engagement, developing and using decolonized research methodologies, overcoming challenges of creating understanding between the language of science and the language of other stakeholders. So these are some of the things that have come out of the input that has been provided to us through the initiating groups that need to come together, and we need to say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to create these specific products or these tools, these mechanisms, processes, and we're going to translate those into potentially policies or guidelines. The intent being that we establish, you know, the Canadian Mountain Network as a place for research to come together, researchers and the communities come together to solve problems together that make sense within the communities where those problems exist. So examples of immediate outputs, having sort of looked at, I received all of the input from the IGs and was able to sort of sort and categorize, and then worked with the IGs and the team to develop the themes. And we need to now look at what specifically we're going to create within the inspired voices, because there are many different problems that were identified within each area. We can't, however, do everything. We need to focus specifically in terms of what we will have as outcomes in the next 1 to 2 years, in the next 3 to 5 years, in 5 to 10 years. So we're looking really at the short, the medium, and the long term. What will this NCE do in terms of adding value to Canada and Canadians? All right. So some of the sample outputs that when reviewing all of the information and the problem sets that came out have potential are, for example, creating a mechanism for preserving knowledge. So in other words, that the voices that come to us, that we preserve the knowledge from those voices. That we also have mechanisms for dealing with priority core problems, because now we know what they are. So it's critical to identify and prioritize what we need to deal with. And that we can develop strategic plans, and that we have recognition for the value of diverse voices in research, and that the implementation is understood and appreciated. So we need to bring those voices together, and we need to inspire those voices so that they can bring that information into the community and increase the adoption of solutions potentially, but also contribute. So it's a back and forth process within these themes, and we need to really make sure that whatever the LOI says and whatever the research program becomes, that we're really giving a value added as compared to what are we doing that we could not do before. And this is similar to the other themes as well. So I would like to move on to the second theme, unless there are specific questions. Are there?
There's a question. It's a little bit unrelated, but maybe you can repeat this out loud because my mic isn't on.
Okay.
Is there a specific meaning behind the 4 icons on the lower left? I assume water, earth, commerce, and people, but I've learned not to assume.
So the question was, with regards to the icons on the bottom left hand of the screen, what do they stand for? They have specific meanings. It's my understanding that they're examples of outputs of what we could do within the NCE.
Thank you.
Okay. So, all right. So we need to have very specific outputs that we can show within these short, medium, and long term. And we also need to identify who the outstanding researchers are. We need to have approximately 10 principal investigators who will lead from the researcher side, that need to represent these voices and who are capable of taking on the research potentially associated with bringing the voices together, making sure that the voices are respected and that the communication goes both ways. Okay. All right, so I'd like to move to the next slide. The next slide is related to building knowledge. Within this particular theme, building knowledge relates to the actual bringing together of information about the mountains and mountain research, about mountain communities, about mountain peoples. So it is also enveloping all of the other themes, which we'll discuss in just a second. And some of the focus areas within this theme that have arisen are how our information and research can be used to support evidence-based decision-making and policy development. So there's an important science in using science and social sciences to inform decision-making. Better tools for communities to visually understand the impacts of different future scenarios on communities and natural heritage values. Tools that to understand values of visitors with regards to mountain landscapes and communities, and how can diverse types of knowledge be integrated. So those are examples of some of the problems that have arisen within each of the themes that we need to address and develop specific solutions for answering. Within this theme, the building of a world-class mountain research system may very well be one of those critical outputs where we can bring it together but also make information accessible to other people and to be able to build capacity. Other examples that would be valuable outputs may include developing leading-edge policies for collecting, storing, managing, and using data and knowledge. There is a requirement to provide access to information to remote communities, because we know that within mountains that there is a great geographic separation. So we want to make sure that that the communities of the mountains are actually able to access information and share and benefit from the value that is being created in other parts of the network and within other partners and research projects. And there is a strong need within this particular theme to build capacity that encourages and enables partners and end users to be co-designers, leaders, and mobilizers of research. So this includes not only principal investigators in the traditional way that we talk about principal investigators, but also increasing the number of network investigators who can participate and add value within the capacity building and in knowledge that is built and developed for access to users. Another potential output is a specific training platforms or products that leverage the mountain research system to the benefit of communities. So what's really important is what is realistic within the short term, the medium, and the long term that we can deliver on within this theme. So those are things that I need to know as a writer, is what are we promising to deliver. Okay. So yes, yes, Eric.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you would mind just mentioning to the group as a whole in the webinar that feel free for people to send in questions along the way. So in response to what you're saying. Yes,
yes. Eric would like everyone to know that they're more than welcome to send questions in relation to what we're speaking about today. Okay. And ideas, yes, and ideas, definitely ideas. Okay, and priorities in terms of what is critically important to the community so that we know what we need to focus on first. Okay, so with the third theme is called Sentinels of Change. And again, there were quite a few problems that lay under this particular theme, including issues of vulnerability and resilience to climate change, its costs, including mitigating and adapting to climate change pressures. Hazards research came up, cumulative impact assessment of environmental change, and the impacts of extreme events on society, the economy, culture, infrastructure, and health. So many different, these are just examples of the types of problems that came up that became a part of defining Sentinels of Change as a theme. And again, what are we going to deliver within this particular theme? Are they risk management tools, for example? Are they monitoring network and analysis tools? Could they be baseline data sets and predictive models, and bringing those together so that we can have a coherent way of dealing with mountain data within Canada? And potentially new research, monitoring, management, and warning tools, so that the communities that where the research is being done actually have access to real solutions that help them deal with change. So again, we need to identify who would be outstanding researchers for this particular theme and to support it, and who would have an interest in being leaders within this particular area. There's a question.
For clarification, are you looking for 5 to 10 leading researchers in each theme area?
No, there wouldn't be 5 to 10 within each research area. In terms of theme leaders, you'd be looking at probably 2 per theme, but that, of course, does not mean that researchers are precluded. It just means that in terms of leadership, I think that specifically was the question. So there's probably room only for about 1 to 2 at very most. The reality is this particular section of the document is 5 pages total. In that section, we need to identify and describe in 200 words or less each of the theme leads, so they each get 200. So you can see where the pages go, the other key researchers that may be involved, and then essentially 3 pages for the entire research program. Okay? Does that? This is just for the letter. And this, yes, this is just, right, this is for the letter of intent, right? The focus today. So, okay. All right. The 4th theme is Places for Life. And the focus of this theme came together as a result of problems associated with the living, the landscape of the people, and also the biodiversity within that landscape. Identifying mountains as a place of health, healing, and well-being. Issues of human and wildlife conflict came up. The role of environmental education and park interpretation in developing citizens who are aware of, engaged in environmental conservation. Study of mountain species, mountains areas as a public commons and for the common good. So very many different health, social, and economic issues came up within this theme. And that's one of the strengths of the themes, is that they require the integration of economy and health and science together. See, the examples of the types of outputs that may come out of this type of theme, or this specific theme, should I say, are, for example, community health programs, adaptive models, analysis tools that help to build stronger, more resilient communities of biodiversity and environments, so people, plants, and animals. New research and management tools, including baseline information, so we better understand what the impact of change is on health and on traditional lifestyles, as well as policy development, quality mountain information system, so that we can support better science-informed decision-making in relation to having places for life. So again, we're looking for value added. We're looking to see what can we do within 1 to 2 years, what's realistic in 3 to 5. And some of the examples that I have provided you with may or may not survive such a process. We need to be very specific and say what we realistically produce and present. Yes?
Another question coming in.
It would be great to know at some point who's on the call, primarily what kind of Indigenous and other community or remote sectors are represented. Thanks.
I'm afraid I can't answer that myself. I know there are 80 people in the webinar expected from all various communities.
There are 51 attendees right now.
51, okay.
Christy and I will share the information.
Yeah, people can also go and look at our partners on the portal under the directory to see sort of, spans of who's really involved so far. So that would be a good way.
Okay, so the Christy mentioned, I don't know if everyone heard from the microphone, through the microphone, that if you go to the Canadian Mountain Network portal, there's an opportunity there to see the whole breadth of people who have been involved with the Canadian Mountain Network throughout the development of the work and through the initiating groups as well as through other forums. Okay, so again, we're looking to identify who may be outstanding researchers within this particular theme and what is of priority in terms of developing this theme. There are many opportunities. There are many problems that were identified or opportunities, I suppose, that were identified as part of this theme that fit in here. But we need to know what is of most critical importance and what kinds of deliverables do we need to produce within the short, medium, and long term so that we can, in fact, add that value that we're trying to commit ourselves to. Okay, and ensuring that communities, that we are responsive to communities, because ultimately that's what it's about. If we can't do work that is of assistance and help to the receptor, we're not adding the value, or the end users, or the participants in engaging, building capacity. Okay, so the last theme is elevating opportunities. It has a focus specifically related to solving problems that have economic impacts or consequences. For example, it could be the impact of natural hazards or melting permafrost on road network maintenance and design costs. It could be developing new products based on mountain materials, including ancient and extant biologic materials for new pharmaceuticals. Understanding and mitigating economic development impacts, for example, the effects of fracking in the Satu and other areas as this develops. Studies on the benefits and detriments of tourism infrastructure, access and impacts on local wilderness value. That was something that came up quite often for mountain communities as being of real concern. And collaborating on strategic planning and development that balances economic needs with such factors as quality of life, health, habitat for people, plants, and animals. So if for a longer list of the fundamental problems that created essentially or formed these themes, I recommend that you look at the theme document that we put together, and there's an explanation there of how we came to put the themes together that way and why. So it definitely wasn't a process of, okay, you know, here are some themes and we'll stick everything under it. We really looked first at the problems and then developed out of those problems a set of themes that would work. But within those themes, because they are so broad, we really need to now take the opportunity to pin down specific deliverables so that we can identify very clearly what the research program looks like and what excellence looks like. So again, there are some opportunities within this theme for specific outputs, whether it's innovations and new tools developed through research that can be commercialized by industry. So in other words, products that can support communities economically, or models, training tools, the mountain information system itself in support of safely and sustainably utilizing mountain resources and protecting areas, while at the same time balancing that with the need to develop economically. Okay, so I don't know if anyone has any particular questions, but I would like to follow up with saying this is one of the most important sections of the program. It's also one of the more difficult ones to put together. All of the other ones, in a sense, fall out of what is chosen here, whether it's training. You know, we need to know really what the research is that's going to be done. whether it's knowledge transfer, exploitation and exchange, we need to also know what it is that we're going to be delivering. And without knowing that and being able to pin that down within these very broad themes, that's going to make it very difficult for us to prove that we will provide a lot more value by being in existence than we would if we were not in existence. So we really want to leave them with the idea of, boy, we really have to do it. It would be silly not to. Okay. So.
Someone just commented Lake of the Woods area, Treaty 3 area.
Okay, someone commented Lake of the Woods area, Treaty 3 area. What specifically?
In response to what you just said.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's wonderful. I will make a note of that. So if anyone has any other questions with relation to that, if not, then we'll move on to the next section, the budget section with Matt. Was there anything, Julia, that has specifically come? No? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Leo. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being with us this morning. We really do appreciate your time, your valuable time, and participating with us at this stage of the process. And for any of those who I've had the opportunity to meet with previously who are on the webinar, thank you as well for being open and available to us as we sort through some of these elements of our proposal. Today, I would like to very briefly share some information and insights on the financial aspects of a networks of centers of excellence. As mentioned by Eric earlier, the significant federal NCE funding must be reciprocated by cash and in-kind contributions from a wide variety of partners, including, among others, universities, provincial, territorial, municipal, and Indigenous governments, businesses, foundations, not-for-profits, individual philanthropy, and self-generated revenues. In its evaluation process, the NCE Secretariat considers the presence, nature, and extent of contributions from partners, as well as their prospect for increasing over time. In addition to the engagement of partners in defining and participating in the research agenda, as Leo was just explaining, it's critical that some or all demonstrate their value of and commitment to this agenda through financial contributions. The amount of the annual NCE grant varies from network to network, depending on its sector, infrastructure, and infrastructure requirements, as well as its pre-existing supports. The grant generally rises between the earlier and later years of a network, and a typical NCE annual grant ranges from $3 million to $6 million, as I think Eric mentioned. The NCE program does not require its funds to be matched at a specific ratio, or for leverage contributions to be a specific ratio of cash versus in-kind contributions. However, we're told that there's a strong preference for cash contributions, and this is included in some of the NCE program materials as well, which provide for greater flexibility and can be valued more precisely. Furthermore, each round of the NCE program sees higher initial leverage ratios of cash to in-kind contributions, as well as non-NCE versus NCE funds between the different NCE rounds. On average, according to our research, all of the for the currently funded networks, they've had non-NCE revenues of approximately $800,000 in cash and $400,000 in in-kind contributions in their first year of operations. These amounts rise over the course of the NCE's life and of course are bolstered after the first year with the credibility and stability that comes from having the approval of the NCE grant. The budget that we include in the letter of intent will cover the first 5 years of Mountain NCE's operations and will include anticipated funding from both NCE and non-NCE sources, as well as our anticipated expenditures. There's a standard NCE model that we then will tailor to our unique topic and the circumstances of a Mountain NCE, but we anticipate that many aspects of the expenditure side of the budget should be fairly straightforward to develop. Our challenge over the coming months will be to identify detailed non-NCE funding requirements, be they cash or in kind, to cover as many of the remaining expense line items as possible once we've accounted for the NCE grant. Budget values in the LOI are estimated to the nearest $100,000, and we are not required to provide details of all sources of anticipated funding. At this stage, a realistic strategy to secure those funds is all that is required. However, based on the 2015 NCE competition, we expect that we will be required to specify the contributions of our 5 primary or largest non-NCE, non-academic funders. Furthermore, any organization writing or contributing to one of the 5 letters of support that accompany our letter of intent may need to specify their commitments. Oops, that's not very good. There we go. So, with all that context in mind, how can your organization become a financial partner of a Mountain NCE? If you're participating in this webinar today, then chances are your organization sees value in the research topics, potential projects, and training opportunities proposed by this Mountain NCE. NCEs are initiatives that simply do not happen without strong partner support through cash or in-kind contributions. This significant federal funding opportunity for mountain research, for perhaps as much as $75 million of federal funds over 15 years, will be left on the table if we cannot provide a realistic budget in our LOI indicating contributions from universities, provincial, territorial, and municipal and indigenous governments, businesses, foundations, not-for-profits, as well as self-generated revenue streams that can reciprocate the federal grant at a meaningful level. Obviously, that can't be emphasized enough. The LOI stage of the application does not require cash in hand or contractual commitments from prospective partners. Contributions can absolutely be contingent on the success of the full application. If the Mountain NCE is selected to prepare a full application based on timelines for previous NCE competitions and our expected timeline for the LOI stage of the upcoming competition, we will have until approximately mid-2018 to further explore potential benefits to partners and the nature of their financial contributions. What we require at this stage in the coming months will be realistic initial commitments. So you all have, I believe, the sample line items for an NCE budget on page 4 of your briefing materials, and we see some of these examples on the current slide as well. From these examples, some of the really significant major costs based on our analysis of the budgets of other currently funded NCEs would be, not surprisingly, the direct costs of research, first and foremost, salaries and stipends for researchers, for trainees, as well as for NCE secretariat, for the administrative center staff at the host institution to run the NCE. Certainly a lot being a networking oriented initiative, a lot of travel and meeting costs, communications costs, as well as convening activities, AGMs, other symposia, for example. In addition to a substantial base commitment from the University of Alberta, which is on par with that was provided full network of centers of excellence at the University of Alberta, we're exploring a wide range of revenue sources linked to specific activities and benefits for our partners. I'll conclude with a reminder that the online form you will receive following the webinar will request suggestions for potential CMN revenue sources. It will also allow you to request a follow-up meeting with myself if your organization or another organization you are familiar with could be interested in becoming a financial partner. I think, as Leo mentioned, there's a lot of work initially to be done on the theme and the research agenda in order for a lot of folks to be able to wrap their minds around how they could potentially commit to this initiative. So I think that's a real focus for us today, but we did want to just provide the financial context of the NCE program, as well as some of the ways in which people can participate. So we hope that you can start to get your wheels turning to see how you can help make this thing happen. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll take any questions if they've come through at this stage. No? Perfect. Well, then we'll keep moving along. So, okay.
In terms of the principal investigators within the feed areas, can any of these possibly come from outside Canada, assuming the focus is still primarily on Canada?
That's a great question. I don't think I'm qualified to answer. Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, sorry. The question was, can any of the principal investigators associated with themes come from outside of Canada, or do they have to be Canadian researchers? And I was just saying, I don't think I'm actually qualified to answer that question as far as the pieces go. Does anyone in the room have an answer to that?
I don't.
Okay, that may be something we have to confirm.
NCE and the regulations. Leah, do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head.
No,
Okay.
I don't either off
Yeah, it sounds like in the room we don't have an answer for that question. That's an excellent one. We've written it down, and we will absolutely find that out. We know who's asking these questions? We can follow up with them directly? Yeah, okay. Perfect. Well, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, perfect. And my email address is up there. Please, if you'd like to have a further conversation about how your organization can contribute, just shoot me a note. Happy to follow up at any time by phone or in person. So thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Sorry, Joe, the second one.
Okay.
Can matching come from any source, i.e. other NCE grants, other federal departments, etc.? Are there any restrictions?
Yeah. So the question, repeat the question as well. Yeah, the question was, can matching funds come from other government departments or agencies? And the answer is absolutely. We can bring in those funds, but it will not count as a matching contribution. And that's important. We were just discussing as we were starting here the language that we're using. We're talking about sort of reciprocal funds. It is not a matching program. I've been using that language as well. It's easy to kind of fall into that. There's no requirement to match on dollar-for-dollar basis the contributions of the NCE program. Really what it is to have realistic contributions that demonstrate that essentially the end users of this knowledge sufficiently value it to provide their own resources. But yeah, that's a good point that we have to keep in mind. So on federal contributions.
Okay, so I'm here to talk about the socioeconomic context part of the letter of intent. Again, this is very much dependent on how we focus our themes in terms of what statistics we're going to be highlighting. So what is required for this section? So a summary describing the context within which the network would be positioned to generate multifaceted solutions to complex Canadian problems, challenges, or opportunities, and that's directly from the 2015 guide. So specifically, social and economic facts that emphasize the need for a mountain NCE, identifying key challenges and opportunities, and what are the economic and social benefits to Canada. And I believe this is a half-page section in the letter of intent. And for reference, we provided the webinar briefing document, and this section is on page 5, and it goes through things in great detail. Okay, so basically, so for this, we need to identify the most compelling facts that support the need for a mountain NCE. So there are many issues. Again, it depends really on the theme focusing that we do, but these are just some examples, and we are looking for some feedback from everyone in the webinar and in the room here today. So issue examples could be climate change effects on infrastructure in mountain communities. What would be some statistics that would support this bullet point, for example? And these are, again, just examples. Legacy of contaminants and frozen materials, impacts of tourism on biodiversity, mountain economy diversification or succession. And then we just provided again some specific statistic examples. I'll just read through the bottom one. 70% of glacier ice in British Columbia and Alberta could disappear by the end of the 21st century, creating major problems for local ecosystems, power supplies, and water quality. So we really need to get some really outstanding statistics here to support the focus areas that we have. And as we go farther along this process and make some key decisions, we'll definitely be looking to everybody virtually online here and in the room to help us with some of those statistics that are really meaningful in your particular area of study or in your region where you live. So some of the key challenges would be, for example, requiring a multidisciplinary approach that integrates the needs of people, environment, and economy, remoteness of and access to communities, etc. Some of the critical opportunities would be creating a knowledge information system focal point for mountain research, consistent and holistic research approach to solving specific problems as opposed to the current kind of ad hoc approach, science-informed decision-making, etc. So you kind of get the idea here. And what we're looking for today and in the following weeks is if anyone has some of these socioeconomic examples, please feel free to submit them today through the webinar or in the online form, as we've mentioned multiple times, that will come at the end of the webinar. So any statistics you might have or that you might be able to produce or point us to, we'd be really grateful for that. So are there any questions about this section?
Yeah, there's a couple of comments from you. One of them, one person's interested in 2 points for follow-up. Point 1, will colleges have a leadership role?
Okay.
I don't know if you want to address that now.
I guess we can follow up with that one, unless anyone, I don't know.
Sure.
Is there NCE?
Right, yeah, so some institutions are NCE eligible, or pardon me, are eligible to receive Tri-Council funding. So those would be in particular, but that you have to be able to receive Tri-Council funding.
Okay. The second point from that person was, what has been done to recruit hydro corporations? We are working with NTPC here in the Northwest Territories, and it would be an ideal place to look for eligible partnership funds and in-kind.
Okay, super. I think there's some discussion in BC for hydro, right, Matt?
Yeah, could you repeat?
Oh, okay. So the question was just about engaging with hydro companies and talking about Northwest Territories. So I think we have in BC, but not in Northwest Territories as far as I know. But we can follow up on that as well.
Okay. One other comment. For Yukon, and I expect elsewhere, reconciliation must be directly and specifically included in the section and elsewhere.
Okay, thank you. Reconciliation must be, sorry, must be included in this section was the comment.
And then one more is socioeconomic context.
Okay, and that's just a repeat of the title, yeah. All right, anything else? Questions in the room or no? Okay, I'll pass it on.
Thanks, Christy. Okay, so again, thank you for coming, and I'm going to talk about the requirements for the HQP, Highly Qualified Personnel Training section. And so again, this is a one-page summary that we will provide on our plans for providing HQP. If you're following along this, we're on page 10 of the briefing documents for the webinar. So I thought I would read to you the wording given in both the 2009 and 2015 NCE guides. It's unchanged for those two. We don't know, of course, whether it will change for this upcoming call. But the statement is, the training and retention of HQP is imperative to maximize the effectiveness of the network's contribution to the wealth, wellness, and well-being of Canadians. The training program proposed by the network is expected to add value to the formal training initiatives already available through the economic community and should aim at helping HQP find employment in the Canadian economy, i.e. private sector partners, government, etc. The multidisciplinary and multi-sectoral nature of a network should be utilized to provide unique mentorship and training opportunities to maximize HQP retention and integration in all facets of the workforce. So there's a lot to unpack there, but what we need, again, is to provide essentially training for jobs that is training that's multi-sectoral, that is unique and innovative, and that really does play up the strengths of the network. And so what we see is a chance to really broaden the definition of what we consider both to be those qualified to provide the training and qualified essentially to receive the training, so that broaden the definition of HQPs. And so, my notes haven't been updated. So what we, again, intend to do is broaden the training of HQP, take advantage of the diverse nature of the CMN members and partnership. Thank you. Oh. Okay, the scary cam. With the goal of combining as appropriate scientific knowledge with indigenous and local knowledge in the training of HQP. So this is very much in line with, for example, the modes 2 and 3 research, the community-led and I forget the titles of these, but again, more than just research motivated or scientific inquiry motivated research. So addressing specific issues faced by communities in mountain regions Canada-wide. And so acknowledging that useful information, rich knowledge is held by First Nations partners and other Indigenous partners, by groups such as trappers or bush pilots, so people who have been on the land for some time and have valuable knowledge to share, to incorporate that formally in the training of HQP, and to ensure that not just academics receive the training, but also, say, a municipal leader or First Nations youth group or youth individuals. And so again, to quite take a step back and look at who can benefit from the knowledge we're gaining. We essentially covered the first 2 points. We want to increase the effectiveness and communication of the research discoveries with the end users of the knowledge. And this is something that we've not necessarily always been good at, is taking the scientific results, for example, and communicating them broadly to help with the knowledge-based decision-making that takes place in communities. Finally, building capacity and opportunities within mountain communities. And so again, a re-envisioning of what we consider HQP training and trainers. There's a question in the back there.
Yeah, so this one came in just at the end of Christie's section, actually, or in response to the end of Christie's section. It was a comment about the socioeconomic context saying, facts related to rapid disappearance rates of Indigenous languages are compelling, so too are significant efforts to learn languages and cultural resilience.
Okay, so in the socioeconomic impacts, the comment was related to the rapid rate of loss of Indigenous language. And the second part, again?
Significant efforts to learn languages and cultural resilience is important.
Okay, and efforts to learn languages and cultural resilience, also important points to make in that socioeconomic impact. And that's the first half page, is it not, of the LOI? So that essentially a socioeconomic statement sets the stage for the entire NCE motivation, essentially. So that's a key component, and I thought I would make that point. So looking over successful HQP programs, there's a number of common themes I think we can take and then build upon. So the first would be maximizing mentorship. So one example is that the Allergen NCE has a target ratio of researcher PI to trainee of 1 to 5. So a pretty tight group there that would work together. And again, if we extend the mentorship from the more typical university setting to include elders as they would like to participate, or other local groups, we really can diversify the knowledge that's being input to the network. And then capacity building in general through travel grants and scholarships, so we can envision moving researchers from the south into the north. We can envision moving youth or students from the north into the south, potentially taking with them results from their own field surveys to bring to the lab and work through to completion, to publication. Again, broadening our efforts there. Scholarships, student presentations at annual general meetings. And in that case, we'd like to, again, see tools developed for better communicating the results to a broader audience. So not just a scientific poster, but rather perhaps a more interactive presentation or a video presentation or a blog that would, again, better communicate the results to a broader audience. A professional network, and one example that we would either emulate or potentially team up with would be the Association of Polar Early Career Scientists, or APEX, which has a strong focus on networking and developing networks as a young researcher to help you through your career, and along with communication. They really stress that. So I think we think that's a good fit, and it's a conversation we'll have to have with them. And then sharing of training between network members. Again, moving students across country to get the benefit of learning from different labs, learning hands-on techniques. And again, with the different community partners that we were hoping to develop. So what we're hoping to learn, there's a funny focus, in my view, there's a funny focus in the wording on existing training programs, which makes sense because you need to play to the strengths of the network. But we'd also like to move past those. So the question I've raised, and I'll get to the hand in a moment, is what existing training programs are there? And then I'd also like to ask a subsequent question as to, and this could be answered online or after the fact or today, what aspects would you like to see added to this list, or what changes should we make to better enmesh this training program within the Mountain Network? So question is being asked.
So from the NCE directive that you just cited, how is HQP retention defined? Is this in reference to retention within the broader partner community or specific to academia? That's
a great question. So the question was, how is retention of HQP defined? And reading through one of the longer term goals, I think it's answered only this clearly in the NCE guide. One of the longer term goals of HQP program is to develop a pool of highly qualified personnel for Canada. And so I don't believe it is well defined. I think that we will have to develop metrics to show that clearly and to show that we're addressing the needs of mountain communities. So that's a great question I don't have a clear answer for. Any other questions?
That's it.
Any questions in the room? No? Okay, I'm passing back to Eric.
Thanks very much, Jeff, and thanks everyone out there for the questions and comments that are coming in. Please don't hesitate. It's great to hear from you. So I want to just very briefly address the subject of overlaps. So if you are referring to the briefing document, you'll find this part on page 11 and also Appendix C, which lists some of the many organizations that we began to flag. So what is important for this part of the letter of intent? Well, let's go directly to the guidelines that NCE has provided us in the past, and just a small caveat that there's a chance these guidelines may shift a bit with the upcoming call, but what we know so far is that where there's significant overlap or reasonable potential for perceived overlap between a proposed network and a currently or previously funded initiative, we need to provide a short explanation, and as I recall, a half page, that describing both qualitatively and quantitatively the differences between the proposed network and the currently or previously funded initiative. So that's what our charge is. And before I go on to the next slide, there's a question.
HQP might also look to incorporate arts and humanities knowledge and epistemologies to generate and communicate outcomes. For instance, music, dance, stories, guided heritage walks, artwork, legal assistance, radio podcasting are all means of communication. We need all forms of knowledge and outreach to serve back to communities and humanity.
Great. That's a wonderful and really articulate comment on the value of a broad perspective on knowledge. So looking at the full range of performing arts and fine arts to be able to spread out the deep commitments we have to mountain communities and mountain environments. So that's great. And just to rest assured that that's been fundamental in how it is that we've been thinking about the mountain network going forward. And indeed, lots of contributions coming in around that. Another question.
Need to create a pool of HQP who can effectively lead and participate in decision-making and planning processes, not just researchers that would feed information to these processes.
Sure. Can you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
Need to create a pool of HQP who can effectively lead and participate in decision-making, not just researchers that will feed information into these processes.
Great. So just an emphasis that we need to create HQPs who are able to go out and mobilize in policy and decision making and not just in research. So that's a point well taken, and also part of the commitments that the NCE process emphasizes. So thank you for that. So there's, in this section around overlap, it's kind of cuts in two directions. So because this is a network proposition, right, a proposal that's about a network, we want lots of overlap because we want to connect all sorts of different organizations and individuals and activities. But there's also the case that we don't want too much overlap in a particular way, a way that would suggest that we're just repeating something that's already been done or just making a really marginal change in how the research landscape looks. So what questions would be really helpful to answer and get some really good feedback on is, are we missing any overlapping or complementary initiatives? And you'll see a long list in Appendix C of some of the organizations that we've begun to look at and identify as potentially fitting in. So please, if there's ones you see missing, or some you see as maybe not quite so relevant, or ones that need more emphasis, please let us know. The second question is, what are key overlaps that we should be focusing on? Where should we be putting some of the energy in identifying those? And third, are there any emerging initiatives or organizations that you're aware of that are relevant to what we're trying to do. So things that may not quite have made it onto the radar screen yet, but are coming. So really, really like to hear about those. So we're focused, we've identified a number of existing NCEs that we think we have relationships with, that ones that are already funded that bear some connection directly to us. ArcticNet, which I mentioned in my introductory remarks, is tailing off after, well, it's now been 14 years, is that right? 14 years, so we're, it'll be winding up next year. So that's a one that certainly has some overlap with what we're trying to do. High altitude and high latitude regions share much in common. There's also the more recently funded Canadian Water Network that has a lot of connection to some of the themes that we've been exploring and what people have been talking about in terms of mountains as water towers and all of the issues related to water. So those are a couple. There's also, we don't have it thought as much about it, but the marine focused NCE, the MEOPAR, has lots of direct connections with what we're doing. So anyway, you can see the list of the many organizations that may provide overlap. And so overlap examples, complementary examples as well. So initiatives that kind of provide a direct complement for what we're trying to do and emerging issues. So there are a few examples that we provide on the slide here. A question?
A valuable existing training program for HQP that doesn't focus solely on academics is the Dechinta program hosted at UBC. There was 1 year they ran Dechinta and Dechin La Lodge in the Mackenzie Mountains as well. Following up with the Dechinta organizers and their Dechin La Lodge contacts would be a good step to developing an effective model for Northern HQP training.
Great. So an existing program based at UBC. I didn't quite catch the name, but Dechinta? Dechinta. Okay. So that's got a good model for kind of looking at HQP training. Good.
Another one is I can't locate the attachments with background material for this webinar, but it's possible to resend. Just a note.
So someone just commenting that they can't, they don't seem to be able to locate the background material briefing document.
It was in the reminder emails.
So if you have a reminder email about this webinar, then the link is in that reminder email.
Is there overlap with Y2Y Yellowstone to Yukon?
Is there overlap with Y2Y? That's the Yellowstone to Yukon program. I don't think so. And I say that jokingly because Aaron Jacob, who's one of the conservation ecologists with Y2Y, just happens to be in Victoria with us today. So Aaron, could you just speak a little bit about, I put you on the spot? But.
That's okay. We see a lot of interesting things here and are pleased to be part of it. So it's not a conflict. We're really excited about it.
Yeah, so a real complement, not a conflict, lots of potential for developing relationships. So good. I'm glad to hear that.
Go off the stuff for a minute.
Okay.
There may be overlap with one CREATE, responsible development of low permeability hydrocarbon resources, funded in 2017. 2, NCERC CCNet, Canadian Cordillera Network. This is a just submitted SPGN application that seeks funding to establish various geophysical monitoring systems, primarily for hazard tectonics and mineral exploration.
Right. I'm not going to attempt to repeat that comment, not because it's not really valuable, but because it's complicated and a bit long. But just focusing on a couple of really new initiatives that are worth finding out more about and just ensuring that we're not reinventing something.
Great. Next, what is the theme of the potential Waterloo NCE?
What is the theme of the potential Waterloo NCE? It is, correct me if anyone knows better, but climate adaptation is my understanding. Is that right on the Waterloo focused NCE? Yes. So clearly there's connections and potential overlap in some aspects of what we're doing, and this is one of the challenges we have over the next few months is to try to bring that together. But they're focusing specifically on climate adaptation. One of our 3 core themes, as you know, is Sentinels of Change. So we're looking at mountains for their distinctive role in providing an understanding of the dynamics of environmental and ecological and cultural change. So there would be some overlaps. But, Leo, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, and so another opportunity within the overlap section is to also talk about the potential for interfacing
Yes.
with some of the existing groups. So it's not only building value on existing groups, but also interfacing with other partners so that you leverage each other's strengths. I think is a real opportunity to discuss in that one page that we have.
Right. So Leo Storia is just mentioning that we need to think about overlaps also in terms of interface. So how we see what we're writing up and describing for our letter of intent actually really significantly interfacing in constructive ways with other initiatives, either those that are already in place or ones that are emerging. Yeah.
Several more.
There's several more questions rolling in. That's great. So.
It would be worthwhile to include arts-focused organizations that could include HQP training, such as Mountain Film Institute.
Ah, very good.
Could you repeat that?
Sure. So there's value in bringing in arts-focused organizations like the Mountain Film Institute. Is that right?
That's right.
And we have had conversations. Correct me, Matthew. You've met with them, and we've also been working with the White Museum of the Canadian Rockies and a number of the Yellowhead Museum in Jasper, Royal Alberta Museum. So we're starting to make linkages to those strong arts organizations. Good.
I see a missing national and multilateral initiative to incorporate and connect with this one. Parks for All is a national strategic framework, draft in progress, guided by Canadian Parks and Recreation Association, Canada Parks Council, and Alberta Recreation and Parks Association.
So a potentially missing piece around is a Parks for All initiative. So we need to close that loop and just understand that a bit better. Thank you for that.
Some areas that may overlap with the Canadian Mountain Network, the Global Network of Mountain Observatories, under the Organization of Biological Field Stations, Global Tree Line Range Expansion Experiment. Those were just
right. So a number of suggestions about international connections, and we have been flagging some of those, and certainly trying to make outreach to those. And I know David Hick has been in contact with at least, I'm aware of 2 of the 3 suggested organizations. So thank you for that. And we need to keep going with making those international connections that are vitally important.
We got 5 more.
Whoa. So lots of comments rolling in.
Yes. As a follow-up on Jacinta, if this is not a partner organization being considered, it might be worth reaching out. As described on their website, Jacinta Center for Research and Learning is a Northern-led initiative delivering land-based, University of Alberta accredited educational experiences led by Northern leaders, experts, elders, and professors to engage Northern and Southern youth in a transformative curricula based on the cutting-edge needs of Canada's North.
Good. So again, along a comment just making a real appeal for looking at programs that are already in place for educational programs focusing on Indigenous communities and the North. So I'm just summarizing, for those of you who are out there, I'm summarizing some elegant and articulate comments that I can't fully repeat, but just to say that we're logging these and taking them well into account as we hear them coming in. Sarah, okay, just pause here as we're waiting for another one to roll in.
Take a screenshot so you can read it.
Oh. Oh, I see. Look at the technology is amazing. I'm going to get a screenshot of that last comment. Oh.
So I could just read it.
Yeah, why don't you read it, Julie?
Sure. Okay. As a question, there has been a survey of partnership grants to see what connections there might be, has there been a survey of partnership grants to see what connections there might be? There's a BC-led Shirk partnership grant on water governance and Indigenous law. I suspect there may be other PGs that might be relevant.
So these are specifically with respect to partnership grants, right? And we don't have a full inventory of those, but that's a really great suggestion in terms of what we should be doing, unless I'm mistaken. Have we No, I don't think we have. So looking specifically at the partnership grants that are emerging through SSHRC primarily, I think it's SSHRC that has the partnership grants. Does NSERC have a partnership grant program? A Connect grant, that's right, right. So we need to look at those. So that's a good source potential, complementary.
That we met with the SSHRC Partnerships Office.
Yes, and we have met with the SSHRC Partnerships Office, so getting a grip on what those programs are about and what their priorities are going forward. All right.
Okay.
There's more.
I'm going to see if this doesn't make my computer crash again. It appears to be working, so if you guys can't hear me, then you can ask the questions again. But the next one we are on is, the above is also an opportunity for interface between many governments and nations and other groups. That's just a comment. Someone else sent another link to a NASA Arctic Boreal Vulnerability Experiment. And that, hold on, a couple more. The Canada Sea Ice and Snow Evolution Network. Okay, you can hear me, great, thanks. The Canada Sea Ice and Snow Evolution Network includes a range of research on changing contributions of mountain snow to river flows. The network is holding a workshop at UVic today with the PI attending. Another one, I get the sense that this initiative is strongly slanted towards environmental and ecological research and the related societal impacts. I do not see any emphasis on how mountains are made and eroded. Could you comment on the potential role of earth science in this initiative?
I'm going to ask.
I'm going to ask Jeff Kavanaugh. Would you be able to comment on that?
I get the sense that this initiative is strongly slanted towards environmental and ecological research on the related societal impacts. I do not see emphasis on how mountains are made and eroded. Could you comment on the role of earth sciences?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that see more than my neck. Yeah, so I think that what we will need to define are the questions that address issues faced by Canadians. And so obviously the history of the mountains, the formation of the processes that built them also impact things like stability and hazards. But I think that, so there's key aspects that the fundamental understandings will add. But I also note that we can't cover everything, we can't be everything to everybody, and we need to find the compelling reasons that the NCE should be funded now. And those are often issues that have more direct impact. And so whether the orogenies end up in the proposal is open right now. But thanks.
Okay, and apparently the last question for now. Are there links to be made to the United Nations Sustainability Agenda?
Yes, is the short answer. But that's a vast question, and I'm not exactly sure specifically how we'll make that happen. But that really frames one of the global agenda items that we need to likely incorporate. I'm staring at Leo. Sure, thank you very much for that. There's also a variety of other international conventions and protocols that are defining how we think about mountain-based regions and communities that we need to frame the document with. So yes, thank you for that. Okay, we still have time for a few more questions, and we're in good time, so that's great. But I'm going to just move to the final slide, the thank you slide, to express appreciation for all of the people who have joined us, more than 50 people from all over Canada and perhaps beyond. And the people who are joining us, the 25 people in the room who are joining us today here in Victoria. I had an email, by the way, from a colleague in Ottawa just a few minutes ago who said it's 23 degrees and sunny in Ottawa, and it's only 11 degrees and not so sunny in Victoria. So we lose the lottery on the weather today. Julie, there's another question coming in.
Yeah, someone just had a comment in response to the previous question saying that the CCNet SPGN application provides a link to the earth science aspects of mountain research. That was one comment. And then another question is there a plan to add someone with a social sciences background to the leadership?
That's those are both great comments. I can address the second one, which is that part of my role as a social science funded scholar and someone who has had a foot in several different disciplinary arenas, but specifically in social sciences and natural science, I bring some of that skill to the leadership team. But there are many more scholars at from universities across the country from the social sciences who are keenly interested in the Mountain Initiative. So yes, it's definitely part of what we're thinking about.
Yeah.
Well,
Alan Carroll, who's in the room with us, you have a question.
Well, it's more of a comment than anything else. It just seems to me that with the themes laid out as they are, with the overarching themes of inspired voices and building knowledge, it seems to me that if we're moving forward with leads in each of those themes, it might be wise to have representatives of those two overarching themes coordinate with the theme leaders that are chosen to pursue the LOI to ensure that those aspects are brought out.
that's great.
Comment, and just do we know if people were able to hear Alan's?
I would gather not well.
Okay, well, I'll just repeat the comment or paraphrase the comment. Just really focusing on ensuring that the leadership in the theme areas, in particular those overarching themes around knowledge and inspired voices, embrace the breadth of knowledge, and particularly the social sciences. So have I got that more or less right?
Yeah, my thought was moving forward though that if a particular aspect of a theme is being developed by someone who's not a social scientist, it might be nice to have them associated with one to ensure that those aspects are brought out and represented by the issue of inspired voices and building knowledge themes.
Great, great. So we're looking at the potential for pairings of key leaders, and that there's that cross-cutting engagement. That's great. Thank you.
There are two more questions.
There are two questions. Yeah, please.
Under the elements of successful HQP slide, I believe that a very important priority amongst the 4 items is building capacity and opportunities within mountain communities. This needs to be reflected more substantially within the theme descriptions, particularly in the themes building knowledge, sentinels of change, places for life, and also elevating opportunities. This can include more around community engagement, innovation, best practice, and building community capacity for sustainable best practice, environmental, sociocultural, and economic. This particularly is important with the relationships and sustainability of mountain communities and their economic drivers, including tourism and leisure, health and wellness, resources-based industries, creative industries, education, governance, and other services. Any response?
I would say that we are quite focused on trying to go up there. Shout. Yeah, thank you for that comment. Those issues are ones that we are focusing on quite heavily, and if that didn't come across in these materials, that's just an error on my part.
To follow on a question about UN sustainability agenda and international funding, what is the expected capacity for engagement with international mountain centers, e.g. data sharing, motivation, research programs, HQP, etc.?
Great. So a question about international sharing with or collaboration with organizations and sharing of data and so on. David Hick, would I be able to get you to speak to that question? You may have to come up here though. Thank you.
So it's a great question. I won't try to go through a litany of the various partnerships that exist, but let's just say that Canada has been, I can move back. Canada, one of our motivations for the Canadian Mountain Network is that in Canada there's many excellent pieces of work being done, but they're very fragmented, so we're collecting it in the first instance into one common framework, which is the Canadian Mountain Network. And once we do that, I think we can easily plug into many of the international partnerships and organizations that exist. We've been very They've been very welcoming, both at the individual institution level, but also framework programs like the Mountain Partnership, the UN Mountain Partnership, or the Mountain Research Initiative that's coordinated out of the University of Bern, and then various national programs in other parts of the world. Also in the United States, Eric and I were down in Fort Collins and Boulder a few weeks ago, and it's very clear that there's tremendous opportunities for partnership with the United States in connecting the North American mountain environment. So I think those connections exist, and we have many ongoing conversations with partners that are very keen to support the development of the NCE, so that from a Canadian side we can be much more actively involved in these global programs. So there's lots of opportunity there.
Thanks very much, David.
They just keep coming in.
Maybe we'll just take, how about we take, what, 3 more questions, and then I think we should close. And
Okay. Continue. Sure.
So one is just a comment. An arts and humanities team leader would add and enrich the excellent leadership in social sciences and sciences already present. It's very important to include both sides of SSHRC. Another comment is, yes, interdisciplinary, not simply multidisciplinary. And another one is that this person can provide us with information about NCERC partnership grants, CREATE, SPG, and SN.
thank you. So those are all good comments. So looking at providing someone in the leadership team who might have strength in the part of SSHRC funding that focuses specifically on fine arts, which is a great suggestion. Second is around the terminology. We use the NCE terminology, which is multidisciplinary, but in effect, we see this as more than just a collection of disciplines, but integration with, among disciplines, and that's what I think of as interdisciplinary. So I think your comments appropriate. We are thinking in an interdisciplinary framework, but sometimes necessarily use the language that's been given to us by NCE. So good. Those. Thank you for the comments. Good. Well, I just want to thank everyone for your time this morning, for joining us in this endeavor, and invite you to continue to connect with us on ideas, engagement, suggestions, criticisms, constructive, and anything that will help move this forward. We're really excited. I go back to my one of my first insights into the Canadian Mountain Network when it was under formation, when I was having a conversation with David Hick about it, and my immediate response was, oh my goodness, do we ever need this kind of overarching program in Canada to bring mountain communities and mountain researchers together? And everyone I speak to about this says, wow, that's a great idea. So it is a good idea. I think it's an inherently good idea, and we hope that through this major funding program, we'll be able to give legs to this particular initiative. The Canadian Mountain Network will also provide leadership going forward, being able to, expand the connections that we have across the country with respect to mountain science and mountain culture. So, did we achieve what we set out today? I hope so. We hope that we were able to articulate our progress in developing the LOI. We've certainly received good feedback, strong feedback, and we will have more going forward. I just wanted to remind people that you will receive an email that will invite you to provide additional comments and suggestions, so please do. And if you want to have specific follow-up communication with any members of the team, so if you're interested in partnerships and you want to talk to Matthew Barry, please do follow up directly. Christy Urban tends to be sort of the integrator. She, if you don't know exactly who to contact, then talking to Christy is almost immediately gets you connected to the right person. So please do. Don't hesitate at all. And if you know of someone who you think ought to be participating in it, please let them know and pass it along. We've been gratified by how many people have expressed an interest, but we're also daunted by the fact that every time we reach out, we find more people who want to be engaged. So that's good news, but it's daunting. And finally, in terms of whether we've achieved what we set out to do today, do we have a greater indication of who might be interested in participating? Well, we suspect so, just because there are a lot of you who joined in on this webinar. And we hope that we've been able to increase the pool of interested people. So thank you so much. Just one more reminder about the follow-up comments, please do, and you'll receive, you'll be queued up about that. So please, please do. And just to thank very much the University of Alberta and specifically the Faculty of Science for their generous support of these initiatives, and for this particular workshop, also the Office of the Vice President Research here at the University of Victoria. So with that, I'm just going to scan the room and make sure there's nothing else that I need to say or comment on right now. Julie's raising her hand. Let me just see.
So there's just one more question. Is there any explicit recognition that a center of population need not actually be located among mountains to be considered affected by them?
Oh, so that's a great question. You know, does it, you need to be in mountains or be affected by mountains to, you know, centers of population? I would think of Calgary as an excellent example of that, but we can even move further afield as rivers flowing out of the mountains flow east and north. So these are all, you know, we have been interested in looking at how larger centers of population outside mountain regions are affected by mountain regions. That's a good observation. Anyone else want to comment on that? All right. Yeah.
The short answer is yes.
Short answer is yes.
And apart from that, there are just a number of people saying thanks for the great meeting. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks. We appreciate it and look forward to connecting with people going forward. So many thanks again, and look forward to seeing you in and around the mountains in the next few years. Thanks very much.
Shut it down.